So today we'll be first going over what are prostaglandins, then we'll get into what is the digestion, absorption and metabolism of your lipids. All right. So first of all, coming to prostaglandins, these are molecules which have around 20 fatty acids. Okay. These prostaglandins, so by definition, these are 20 carbon fatty acids. Okay, they are secreted almost by all human cells except RBC. They have some specific subtypes and some very specific roles, important roles in your body. Now, generally, prostaglandins are synthesized or they get their origin from your prostate gland. Hence, they are called prostaglandins. Okay, so originate from prostate gland. Right, hence they are called prostaglandins. Now, these promote contraction of intestine of your uterine muscle, and they help in lowering BP. We'll get into a little bit more detail when we come across biological actions of prostaglandins. Now, there are several types of prostaglandins. You'll have prostaglandin E2, E1, F2. You'll have prostacyclins. There are several kinds of prostaglandins. Okay, and mainly they differ in the structure due to a substituent group or due to a double bond. So it is either something that is added to a prostaglandin. So one second, prostaglandins. Um, they differ in their structure due to substituent group. So something, a group that is added to it. So it can be an acid molecule, it can be a OH molecule, it can be a keto molecule, any functional group that is attached to it, and a double bond, especially present on the cyclopentane ring. So one second, I'll show you an image for different types of prostaglandins, so you'll understand a little better. Yeah, see, so these are different types of prostaglandins. Now you have several types, as I told you. Yeah, PGF, PGI. In PGF itself, you will have several other types, PGIE2. Now, if you see in the cyclopentyl ring, there itself you will have difference in the double bond, or you might have difference in the functional group that is attached here. So, for example, if you compare PGF2 alpha and the first two, okay, PGF2 alpha and PGF2 alpha IE, in them you can see that there is a functional group change. Mainly on the right side, instead of a carboxylic acid, you have COOCH methyl group, right? Dimethyl group specifically. That is how prostaglandins will differ. Now, depending on their different structural differences, they have different functions. Mostly, they will be taking part in your inflammatory processes. Yeah, they'll be mostly taking part in your inflammatory processes, them being a very important inflammatory mediator. Some of the most important prostaglandins, PGI2 and PGF2, what they do is they will create local inflammation whenever there is injury and all, they will be secreted. All right, they are part of the cytokine system, and ultimately what they do is they cause fever. Okay, that is one of the most important functions of your prostaglandins. Fever being the indication that, and they will also cause pain. So fever and pain both are indication that there is something wrong in your body, so that the patient might, or the person whoever has the injury, might get it treated. Okay, it is your body's way of telling you that there is something wrong, please get it treated. So that is a little bit about prostaglandins. Now your prostaglandins, coming to the what you call biological action of prostaglandins. Biological, what do they do, what is their function, and what is their significance? Now, when we talk about biological action of prostaglandins, they largely act as hormones. Okay, they will regulate your blood pressure, they will take a part in reproduction, and they will have a part in your respiratory function. These are the main three functions of your prostaglandins. First of all, coming to blood pressure. So blood pressure maintenance or regulation of BP. You have PGE2, PGA, and PGI2. These three are vasodilators. So PGE1, PGA, and PGI2. Okay, the two is in subscript. I'm not able to write it that way. That is why. So all these three are vasodilators. What are vasodilators? What do you understand by the term vasodilator? Ever came across this term?
which is causing the dilation of blood vessels.
Yep. So they will cause dilation of blood vessels. Why is it important? Think of it this way: whenever there is injury, let's suppose there is this tissue. Okay, for example, this is a tissue, and there is a bacteria that is invading this tissue. Okay, one way or the other, the bacteria has entered this area, and it is what you call causing damage in that tissue. Okay, whenever it is causing damage, these cells in turn will release prostaglandins. Prostaglandins will cause local inflammation, and they will cause dilation of the local blood vessels. So if your blood vessel is of this diameter, let's suppose it becomes a little more dilated and it becomes this big. What happens because of this? Blood will start rushing in. Okay, because of that, what will happen is there is a higher chance for your immune cells to come to this area, right? If you're basically clearing the passage, you are increasing the road, so that more and more number of macrophages and your dendritic cells and phagocytic cells, your T cells, B cells, all of them can invade the area, and they can come into your tissue space. Monocytes, not macrophages. The monocytes will come here and become macrophages, but they will come here and they can attack the bacteria. That is one important function why vasodilation is important. All right. Other than that, if I am having, let's suppose, if blood pressure is increasing because of whatever reason, right? Stress maybe, or due to what you call some exercise the person is doing, or some physical activity, something like that, where blood pressure is increasing. At that point of time, what will happen is prostaglandins are released as a mechanism to cope up with that BP, in the sense that whenever they are released in response to heightened BP, so there is some reason that is causing increase in BP. When there is increase in BP, prostaglandin synthesis will occur and prostaglandins will start getting secreted. When prostaglandins are secreted, vasodilation occurs. When vasodilation occurs, BP will go down. Right? If you have a higher or a wider blood vessel, your blood pressure will obviously fall. Right? I hope you understand the mechanism. If you have a narrow blood vessel, blood pressure in that vessel will be higher. If you simply expand blood vessel, you'll be able to decrease BP. Okay, that is why it is a very potent vasodilator. Second. Yeah. So the other than that, you have PGI1 and PGI2. Now these will induce symptoms of inflammation, specifically due to arteriolar vasodilation. They will cause vasodilation in your arteries, and they will induce symptoms of your inflammation. Your that area will start hurting because nociceptors will get stimulated because of prostaglandins. Nociceptors are your pain receptors. Other than that, it will also cause fever. So both of them indicating that there is some damage, there is some inflammatory reaction that is going on. Now these are natural mediators of inflammation, right? Whenever there is inflammation, especially in case of rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is a special type of arthritis occurring because of your immune system attacking your own what do you call own cells of your bones and your joints. Okay, because of that arthritis is occurring. That is your rheumatoid arthritis. It is specifically connected to connective tissue damage, because of which arthritis is occurring. Now that is how regulation of blood pressure occurs. Other than that, your prostaglandins will also help in reproduction. How? Now specifically PGE2 and PGF2, these are used for medical termination of pregnancy. So they what they do is they not just terminate pregnancy, and they can also induce labor. Now prostaglandins will induce motility of your uterus. Okay, they will increase the motility of your uterus and they will cause expulsion of fetus within a few hours. So depending on when it is used, it can either be used to induce labor or it can be used to cause abortion. Okay, either way. Now, what prostaglandins do is they will facilitate fertilization of ovum as well. So they help in that fertilization of ovum in your uterus and in your cervical movements, and they will help your spermatozoa move from your vagina to your cervix and your uterus. Okay. Low level of prostaglandins in seminal fluid will lead to infertility in men. Generally, if there is decreased amount of prostaglandins, it will be harder for that sperm to reach all the way up to the cervix or uterus. That is why uh, a healthy amount of prostaglandins is required for them to be fertile, right? That is one important role of your prostaglandins with respect to reproduction. So I'll just write those points down. Depending on time of usage, they can as labor inducing agents or um, see, labor inducing agents in the sense, let's suppose someone is going for a normal vertical delivery, not a cesarean, and in such cases, it is, let's suppose, getting difficult to for the person to undergo parturition. So what you can do is you can give a small injection of prostaglandin that will relax the muscles a little bit more, and it will cause motility of your uterus, because of which your fetus will be coming out more easily. Okay? This, if you are doing at the end when the mother is about to give birth, okay, at that time it will cause ease of labor, or it will make it easier that baby can come out. Whereas if you give it early in the pregnancy, that can cause termination of pregnancy. Okay, so it is a double-edged sword. You can use it either way. So that is there. That's why you should be very, very careful when giving prostaglandin substituents. You get prostaglandin drugs, you should not give them in pregnant women. Okay, prostaglandin drugs are given for other reasons as well, not just for this, but you have to avoid them completely in pregnant women, especially those who are not in full term, and when you do not know that what you call the person might be pregnant. Now that is one thing, and low levels of, just write PGs in men can cause infertility, because prostaglandins are facilitating the movement of spermatozoa all the way up to your uterus and your cervix. If there is lesser amount of prostaglandins in seminal fluid, it will be harder for that sperm to go all the way up to your cervix and what you call undergo fertilization, right? That is why prostaglandins are pretty important for fertilization. आप लोगों को reproduction पढ़ा है
No, sir.
अभी
Sir.
तक?
Also,
Uh, you at least know what is spermatozoa, right? Sperm basically.
Yes, sir.
yes, sir.
ठीक है. Now other than that, it has a respiratory function. Now when we talk about the respiratory function of prostaglandins, I'll just erase this so that it will be easier to. So coming to respiratory function. Now, when we talk about prostaglandins with respect to respiration, specifically PGE2 comes into place. PGE, PGE1 or PGE2, they both are bronchodilators. Okay, so they are very, very important in treatment of asthma, especially. Right? Bronchodilation. Now, in asthma, what happens is, um, imagine this is your bronchi. Okay, and we go all the way up from your terminal bronchiole to your respiratory bronchiole and so on and so forth, all the way up to your acinus, let's suppose. Okay, now यहाँ पर if there is excessive amount of mucus, generally what happens in asthma is because of hypersensitivity of the patient's respiratory tract, there is excessive amount of mucus being produced. I'm going to only briefly explain what is asthma. There is hypersensitivity of the patient's respiratory channels, wherein what will happen is anything can trigger the some causes can trigger the patient's respiratory channel to secrete excessive amount of mucus. This can cause blockage. All right, That is one reason. And other than that, whenever this kind of inflammatory reaction occurs, here what will happen is these bronchioles will contract. So technically speaking, they will become smaller. There will be bronchoconstriction. So from this, they will become this, or let me draw it in a different color. Uh, from this, so pink being the original size, they contract to the red size. Okay, because of which it will be harder for the patient to breathe. What PGE1 and PGE2 will do is they will help in treatment of asthma. They will naturally cause bronchodilation. Alright, because PGE1 and PGE2 are bronchodilators, they will cause your what do you call bronchodilation, because of which it will be easier for the patient to breathe. Right, it cannot exactly be told as an emergency medicine, but what do you call, at least for short-term treatment of asthma, it will work in the sense that what people generally carry around with their in their inhaler, it will be a combination of prostaglandins and a few other drugs. Okay, they can be used to cause bronchodilation. Now, again, if a patient has asthma and if they are pregnant, you should not use prostaglandins for obvious reasons, which I just told you. I told you prostaglandins can also be used for other reasons. This is one such a reason, right? But if you have a lady who is pregnant and you want to treat their asthma, you should avoid prostaglandins in them. You give other bronchodilators. You do have other bronchodilators. Now, other than these three important functions, prostaglandins can cause pain, especially PGE2. So let's write here. The first thing is PGE1, E1 and 2 are bronchodilators used in treatment asthma. All right, so that is the first point. Now, other than this, your prostaglandins will also cause pain, especially PGE2 plus histamines. Who secretes histamine? Acha, I ever came across the word histamine? आप लोगों को कभी बोले what is histamine? Histamine and bradykinin, mediators of inflammation. No. Okay, so I'll take that as a no. So these three chemicals, specifically what they do is they will cause pain. They will go and stimulate your nociceptors, and whenever these nociceptors are stimulated, it will cause pain. You have specialized type of neurons present in your tissue space. They can, what do you call, whenever they are stimulated or whenever they are pressed upon, they will cause pain. So other than this, your prostaglandins will also decrease immune functions. Okay, in the sense that it will cause B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes to what do you call, invade that area, and it will facilitate a function of your immunity. It can also cause migraine. So PGE2 has some other functions where it can also cause migraine. Now PGE2 specifically can also cause fever. How it does so is, now normally your body temperature is maintained by a particular part of your brain called hypothalamus. I'm not sure whether you've ever come across that, but there is a very special part in your brain called hypothalamus, right under the thalamus. That is why it is called hypothalamus. Now hypothalamus will be what happens is that fellow will regulate body temperature in a way that, let's suppose I take a graph like this, and let's suppose this represents the function of your hypothalamus with respect to body temperature, in the sense that your hypothalamus will maintain a normal body temperature of around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, degrees Fahrenheit here at this level. What this is the threshold. Okay, this is your hypothalamus already knows that this is the threshold. Beyond this will be fever, and what do you call, I have to maintain this amount of body temperature for normal functioning of the body. I repeat once again, your hypothalamus is responsible for regulating your body temperature. One function of hypothalamus. There are other functions as well. Hypothalamus will maintain or regulate body temperature by maintaining its threshold. Okay, this will be the normal level of body temperature that your hypothalamus is controlling. Whenever PGE2 goes to your hypothalamus, it will change this threshold. So it will basically trick your hypothalamus in thinking that this is not the threshold, this is the threshold, which is a higher body temperature. So it might be 101 or 102, okay, whatever it is. So this is basically causes fever. Here what your PGE2 is doing is it is causing a malfunction in your hypothalamus. Whenever there is excessive amount of PGE2, it will change the function of hypothalamus, or it will change what you call how hypothalamus thinks what the threshold of your body temperature should be. So your hypothalamus starts thinking that instead of 98.6, 101 or 102 is the normal body temperature. That is why the threshold increases. Whenever this threshold increases by this much, the person will have a fever, even though the hypothalamus does not know exactly. Because of PGE2, continuous secretion of PGE2, you will have a fever, okay, along with pain. So those are some of the functions of your prostaglandins. I hope you understood. If you have doubts, please let me know. There are three main functions: respiratory, regulation of blood pressure, and reproduction. That's it. It can also cause pain, that is one function. But uh, other than that, there is body temperature regulation. Okay.
Sir, for the, PGE2 and PG2, blood also will increase. No? Blood pressure also will increase.
Blood pressure will not increase, blood pressure will decrease. अगर
Decrease.
वैस देखो, ये blood vessel है, ठीक है. अब for example, let's suppose you are, I'll give you a easier example for you to understand. Let's suppose you have a tank at the second floor, okay, some water tank at the second floor of your house, and you're trying to get water down, okay. uh, let's suppose at ground floor you have a null and some pipe which is supplying this water, and let's suppose this is how that pipe is, okay. Let's suppose this is how the pipe is. Now, if the pipe is this narrow, the pressure, let's suppose the pressure of water that is coming down because of potential energy is P1. Okay, for example. Now, let's suppose I increase the diameter of that pipe. I increase it this much without changing anything about the tank, without changing its what do you call it, without changing its height, without changing the water level, anything. I'm simply increasing the size of the pipe. What will happen to P1? Will it increase or decrease?
Decrease.
Decrease.
It will decrease, no? Because you're not changing here anything. You're only changing the pressure. What do you call the what do you call the diameter of your pipe. The same way in your blood vessel, if you have this sized blood vessel and you have blood flowing it will have a certain blood pressure. Let's suppose your blood pressure is around 130, 190. If you dilate this blood vessel, pressure will decrease. Okay, because you're giving more wiggle room to your for your blood, it will flow with a little less blood pressure. All right, that is the function of prostaglandins. They will go and cause vasodilation. They will influence your smooth muscles to relax. You have smooth muscles under your on the blood vessel, right? Those smooth muscles will relax and you will have vasodilation. I hope that answers your doubt.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Any doubts? Okay, then we'll go to digestion of your digestion and absorption of lipids. Now, your digestion of lipids, oh dear, that is 1D, okay, lipids were double D type, okay. Your digestion of lipids occurs in three main parts, okay. You have one part of digestion in your stomach, then in your intestine, and through your pancreatic enzymes. So, initially, you will have something called minor lipid digestion in your stomach. So, lipid digestion in stomach. Now, in your stomach, your lipid digestion will initiate. So, you will have a particular enzyme in your stomach called lipase. Lipase is responsible for the breakdown of lipids, hence it is called lipase. Okay, gastric lipase bolte hain isko because it is secreted in your stomach. This fellow will degrade short chain fatty acids at neutral pH. So, it will break down fatty acids. That is the first part. All right. So, this fellow is breaking down just right here, gastric lipase breaks down short chain fatty acids. Okay, that is the first function. What will happen? Or it will degrade short chain fatty acids. Once these short chain fatty acids move into your small intestine, your duodenum, what will happen is emulsification. That is the second step. Emulsion formation. Emulsification. आप लोगों को emulsification क्या है पता है? Do you want me to explain what is emulsification? Because some of you all might have an experiment in your intermediate or something where you make emulsions and all. I'm not sure whether आप लोगों को हुआ नहीं हुआ. How many of you all were taught? Okay, let's assume you do not know emulsification. Emulsification is a process in which you will mix two liquids ideally, which are immiscible in each other, which are what you call, which do not get solubilized in each other. For example, if I want to mix oil and water, traditionally I cannot mix oil and water. I will have to form something called an emulsion. So what I will do is I will disperse oil particles in water or water particles in oil, depending on whatever is more in amount. So if I have more amount of water and lesser amount of oil, I will have a emulsion with oil in water. So water will be the main medium and oil will be the lesser medium. For example, I'll show you one image, it will be easier to understand. Yeah, look at this. Now in an emulsion, you will have something called a dispersed phase and a continuous phase. Now let's suppose on the left you are seeing a small jar with what do you call, the yellow particles. That yellow band represents oil, the blue band represents water, and you add something called an emulsifier. You get different types of emulsifiers. They are special substances that will help in what they call formation of emulsion. To form an ideal solution, technically, yeah, emulsion is not exactly an ideal solution, but at least you're trying to make an ideal solution. You're taking two insoluble substances and you're trying to make a solution out of it. You do not exactly get a solution, they will not solubilize in each other, but you'll come close where you are getting an emulsion. So what happens is, now ये oil को you will use that emulsifier. Emulsifier क्या करता है? It will decrease the surface tension of both the liquids so that they can solubilize in each other. Okay, because of surface tension, that is why they are not mixing together. Okay, because oil has a certain surface tension, so does water. They will not mix together easily, because of which you add an emulsifier. For example, your detergent, some salts, they can act as emulsifiers. So when you add that, what will happen is, now for example, have you ever eaten mayonnaise? I'm sure you must have heard of or at least eaten mayonnaise. I'm not sure how many of y'all are, even if it is vegetarian mayonnaise,
Yes.
you've heard about it, you've used it, right? So usme
Yes.
kya karte hai? Essentially, let's suppose if it is made out of eggs, you take a bunch of eggs, you add a little bit of salt, and you start whisking it a little bit of oil. Slowly you start whisking in oil, right? Because if you traditionally mix oil and eggs, they will break. They cannot mix together and they will break. So what you do is you will slowly add a little bit of oil, gradually, drop by drop, and you start whisking it very vigorously. At the end, what you get is a emulsion. Okay, mayonnaise is essentially an emulsion. It will not exactly be a solution, but it will be an emulsion. The same thing happens here. So in water, what you do is you will vigorously shake that oil after putting an emulsifier. So what ends up happening is those oil particles will get dispersed in the water. So if you can see that small bubble here, you can see the dispersed phase, the phase that is getting dispersed in water. That will be called, that will be the oil, whereas continuous phase will be water. So your main the larger constituent, now it can be reversed as well. You can have oil being dissolved in water as well. All right, in the sense that you take little amount of oil, little amount of water and more amount of oil. In that case, what you will get is the dispersed phase will be water and the continuous phase will be oil. In either case, you are basically dispersing the lesser medium into the larger medium to get an emulsion. I hope that uh, explains what is emulsion. Please let me know if you have doubts. Something similar happens in the digestion of your lipids. Okay, I'll take that as a yes then. Understood. So, coming back to this, emulsification of lipids occurs. So, emulsification of lipids in small intestine specifically of now this fellow, what will happen is dispersion of lipids occurs. As I told you, the dispersion occurs in a fluid state, the continuous state being water, and the dispersed phase being the lipid. Small droplets will be formed because both of the surface tension is decreasing. Small droplets are formed, and as such, emulsification will occur due to three main reasons. Okay, one is because of bile salts. So you have something called bile salts. What are bile salts? अपन इससे पहले पढ़े थे ना? So bile salts will be responsible. They will have a detergent action and surfactant action. What are bile salts? If you remember bile acids, they are very similar to bile acids. You can tell either one. What are bile acids or bile salts? Okay, bile salts are basically a mixture of glycine and taurine. So you have two amino acids mixed with bile acid. So you have cholic acid, deoxycholic acid, chenodeoxycholic acid, and lithocholic acid. These are bile acids. When you mix them with either glycine or taurine and you mix that with sodium, what you get are bile salts. Right? These bile salts will act as detergents. They will act as the emulsifier. So they will help in mixing your lipid with the solution that is present in your intestine. So that is one thing. Other than that, whenever lipids start getting digested, they themselves will act as a surfactant. They will decrease the surface tension. So detergents and surfactants are pretty much the same thing. They will decrease surface tension of liquids. When you decrease the surface tension of liquids, it is easier to mix them. Okay, so what happens is because of bile salts, because of digested lipids, and because of peristalsis, mechanical mixing of peristalsis, you will get emulsions. So bile salts, digested lipids, and peristalsis. Oh dear. One second. And peristalsis. Now imagine peristalsis as being that action of whisking. Okay, when you are trying to make mayonnaise, you are whisking it, right? So peristalsis does that basically. Peristalsis will be the vigorous movement of your intestines and your GID trying to push food down. That mechanical motion will facilitate in the formation of emulsion. One part of formation of emulsion, right? So they will facilitate emulsification. Because of this, emulsions will be formed, and to these emulsions, pancreatic enzymes will act on these emulsions. So specifically in your lipids, you will have triacyl glycerols, you will have cholesterol esters, you will have phospholipids. So individually, whenever you have pancreatic lipase acting on this, you will get cholesterol and fatty acids. Okay, you will break these triacyl glycerol molecules, triacyl glycerol molecules, or you will break down cholesterol ester molecules or phospholipid molecules, and you will get smaller units of fat. So you will get cholesterol and fatty acids. Now you specifically, the fatty acids that you get are free fatty acids. Okay, we'll get into the details of that in the next class, but I hope yahan tak samajh mein aaya what is emulsification. The next step is how lipid digestion occurs through pancreatic enzymes. Okay, we'll discuss that tomorrow.